Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
ScreamingBox Technology and Business Rundown.
Welcome to the ScreamingBox Technology and Business Rundown podcast. In this month's podcast, I, Dave Erickson, and my co-host, Botond are going to search for answers about search engine optimization with our guest, Tom Demers. Tom has more than a decade of online marketing experience and a deep expertise in search engine optimization and pay-per-click advertising. He is currently the co-founder and managing partner of Measured SEM, an online marketing firm which helps clients significantly increase their web traffic and grow their businesses. Tom is also a prolific writer and writes for sites like Search Engine Land and Search Engine Journal. Today we are looking to find out exactly what SEO is and how it can be applied to various business and technology solutions. So Tom, did I miss anything? Is there anything you'd like to add to our humble intro?
No, I think that's a good synopsis. Thanks, Dave.
All righty. Well, search engine optimization is an abbreviation, which means it can mean a million different things to a million different people. Some people think search engine optimization is as simple as adding Yoast SEO to their WordPress site, and some people think it's about content, and others think it's all about keywords and all kinds of other things. So maybe we can kind of start off with a kind of a conversation about what is search engine optimization, and maybe you can break down kind of the parts of search engine optimization.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think off the top, one thing that people might come at, SEO or search engine optimization from different angles for is what platform you're optimizing for. So really, technically, search engine optimization, the way that most people think of it is I want to show up higher in Google, right? In organic listings that are not part of their paid ads. You could think of search engine optimization too as encompassing other alternative search engines like Bing, or even other platforms entirely. So there's, the concept of App Store optimization for search, Amazon search optimization within, Amazon.com platform, or YouTube. Right. And those are actually increasingly a couple of the biggest search engines outside of Google. But I think the most common way that people think about it is optimizing for Google, right? And showing up higher in Google search listings. So when you think about optimizing for Google, and there are some commonalities, but really it's fundamentally different than a platform like Amazon or YouTube. The things that we're thinking about for Google, I think of them kind of at a high level as three different buckets, and there's some overlap between the three, but just, sort of briefly to think about it, there's sort of off-page factors, which are external links. So obviously a major factor for Google since the dawn of Google and still is the external links that point to your site, meaning other websites that are linking back to your site, the volume of those sites and the quality of those sites and the relevance of those sites and the linking pages. So that's one piece. Another piece is what I would think of as on-page factors. So that would be things like the actual content on your page, the way that it's marked up, with HTML, the images on the page, the way that those images are marked up, and how quickly the page loads, and the experience that the person has when they come to the page. So that's another bucket. And that bucket overlaps with a lot of times with what I would think of as the third bucket, which is what I would call technical SEO, which is obviously impacts the on-page factors, but encompasses things like information architecture, the way that your pages are interlinked, the way that Google is able to index and crawl your site, and the way that you're leveraging things like redirects throughout the site. So there's three different, again, right? Like those are three different buckets. And I think one of the things that's really interesting about SEO is the relative importance of those three buckets varies a lot based on the type of site that you have, the age of the site, the type of business that you have. So a B2B SaaS company is going to have very different dials across those three buckets in terms of what's the most important than, say, an e-commerce store, right? Or a local, plumbing service business, right? Which will encompass things like local SEO too. So there's a lot of moving pieces, and there's a lot of, I think, like a theme for me always is answers to a lot of high level SEO questions are kind of, it depends, right? So there's a lot of variance because there's so many different ranking factors that Google's taking into account. But at a high level, that's I think a useful way to think about it.
I think a lot of people are focused a lot on Google searches. That's what they stick in their mind, as a small business or medium business. How do I rank? Because they see traffic only coming from that one source, and they probably clump all, search engines like Bing and Google as one thing. But I think as businesses become more savvy, as they grow or get experience, they'll start looking at a lot of these others. And I do agree that things like YouTube are its own search engine and is growing, as well as the various others, and how images versus text all relate. I think that is a changing ecosphere.
Yeah.
I mean, you did briefly touch on link building. And for me, it's a topic almost as obscure as the Arcane studied by Doctor Strange, right? And so at the low end, we can pay someone on Fiverr to push our pages to the top of Google search results for a day for $5. Or we can subscribe to a high-end service to keep it there for weeks, months, years. But the question remains, what are you doing? How are you doing it? And why is it even a thing? Like, why does it matter?
The reason it matters, so basically, when you look back at the early iteration of Google particularly, part of the reason that it kind of won against other search engines was the idea of using links as a signal for quality, where it was actually, I think Larry and Sergey, the founders of Google, took it from kind of the same concept that people would use with research papers, right? Where if your research paper was referenced in other authoritative research papers, that was an indication of quality and authority. So same premise is true for your website. So if you're getting links from authoritative sources, a volume of links, and increasingly, if the links have contextual relevance, those are seen by Google as an indication of authority. So in other words, if you have a plumbing site and you get a link from a directory that nobody else is linked to, that's sometimes better than nothing, but not super valuable. If you get a link from a very authoritative directory, that's more valuable. If you get a link from a very authoritative directory of plumbers that's hard to get into, that only links to really high quality, plumbing services, that's kind of the perfect nexus, right? So, and then when you think about link building, we do different sort of tactics for different sites and different clients. And again, right, I think it's really it depends, right? So depending on, what you're trying to rank for. So again, for that plumbing service, super competitive national keywords might not make a lot of sense because they're trying to get, local, business, and they're trying to rank for like town name plumbing services, right? So they don't necessarily need a super expensive, PR, outreach campaign. They may need, really organized links from all of the local directories. They may need some links from local websites where they're doing more things like, sponsoring local events, right? And or pitching stories to local news publications. And by doing a lot of that work, they'll actually show up at the top of a lot of the terms that they're trying to rank for. So I think the way that you want to think about it is looking at your goals and what you're trying to accomplish, how competitive the terms that you're trying to rank for are, and then what your resources and capacity are, right? And how you evaluate. And one of the things that's really difficult about link building is figuring out link building ROI, right? Because it's kind of it's just one aspect of SEO, and a lot of SEO ROI is sometimes difficult to back out, especially if your business doesn't do a great job of tracking lead sources, right? So figuring out, okay, and I think a standard metric that we sort of anchor people's thoughts around is, you might pay anywhere from $300 to $600 for a link, right? So what does that mean? If I get a guest post, right, which is basically I pay someone to do outreach to a blog, hopefully a relevant, authoritative blog, get a piece of content posted on that blog. That content links back to my site. Again, the standard pricing might be anywhere from $300 to $600 for that link. So you have to kind of think about the global ROI of, okay, what am I paying for these links? What am I paying for the content on my site? What's my overall SEO investment? And does that back out when I look at the return that I get from my SEO traffic? So that's a challenge with link building. And again, I would say, and then another thing to incorporate there too is your risk threshold, right? So you mentioned Botond, the Fiverr links, right? So the thing about, spammy link building is it's not uncommon that it might work for a period of time and then get your site burned. Right? So if your risk threshold is, okay, this isn't a business for me, this is a site that's a churn and burn, and I'm gonna, invest X and hopefully get Y, and maybe that site gets burned to the ground in 2 years or 6 months or 3 months, then you might be fine with that. But if you have a business website and you're doing a lot of branding around your business and you want to have to change the name of your business or, buy a new domain, then you're probably going to be a little bit more risk averse, and you want to stay away from those and, go towards safer tactics, like some of the things that I mentioned, right? So, yeah.
Right. So if I start a new dropshipping business selling junk, then I want to go to Fiverr for link building.
Potentially, yeah. yeah, exactly, right. And, again, it's like, I think the people who, one of the things to keep in mind too, right, is a lot of people who push specific tactics have an incentive to push that tactic, right? So, if you're doing the high-end, super expensive PR link building, you're going to talk a lot about how the garbage link building doesn't work, and maybe vice versa. Everything works to an extent for a certain period of time, right? But it works until it doesn't sometimes, right? And if it's executed properly, I would say, yeah.
So you mentioned that the site may burn to the ground with garbage link building, but how does it look? Does it just get erased from Google?
Yeah, it can be. And so one of the things that's interesting, I would say in the last 2 years, so I've been doing this for, 10 plus years. It's been the most turbulent in terms of the volume of updates that Google rolls out, algorithm updates, and how swingy the search results can be for specific sites. So, when I say burn to the ground, that could mean zero, right? So there are sites that will get hundreds of thousands, millions of uniques a month, shoot right up, again, on some of these different aggressive or spammier tactics, and then just go to zero, right? And again, like really burn to the ground. And so again, right, for that particular operator, that might be an acceptable outcome because maybe they made their money back on, right, whatever spammy links they bought in the 4 months that they ranked, right? But again, right, like if you're trying to build a sustainable business, you're not necessarily going to be great at evaluating which of those, that's kind of a science in and of itself. And you need to be pretty, again, a lot of the stuff that you will buy on Fiverr will have somewhere between a negative impact to no impact at all. And you'll never get that burst, right? But if you're really good and you kind of can evaluate what link patterns will work for a period of time, then again, you might get a short-lived burst from it, but there's super high risk there. And burn to the ground could be not only that your site goes to zero traffic, but that it's de-indexed, meaning like if somebody's looking for your brand, they can't find you, right? Which again, if you're a business, that's a pretty strong downside, right?
It seems like Google created the index for those businesses who are legitimately trying to, promote their business and do the right thing. And if you do that, you're probably going to be in a low risk activities. And, you said there's these 3 buckets, which is basically there's the technical SEO, there's the content SEO, and then there's the link building. And we've kind of talked about the link building. But how about the content side? Everyone kind of says I put up content, and sometimes the content's done really well. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it syncs with keywords that are important for you. But then there's also the technical side of the site. I think people understand content, meaning they can write content, but a lot of businesses probably don't know the technical side of things like making a clean site and all that. What are some of the things that have been evolving in the last couple of years on the site development side? Like, are there certain types of sites like I don't know, there's now a lot of sites like WordPress and Wix and all these other kind of site builder sites. I don't know, how are they doing as far as SEO is going, or is it still better to build the site from scratch and really meticulously go through all the HTML code and make sure it's perfect? Does it seem to matter a lot? What are your thoughts on that?
My experience is that, again, right, it depends on the implementation. So you can rank a site, that's totally, sort of homegrown and hand coded. Tons of WordPress sites drive tons of traffic. Even some of the platforms like Wix have gotten more SEO friendly than they were a few years ago. So it really just depends on the implementation. A lot of the best practices, some of the things that I think have been increasingly emphasized in the last couple of years, page speed and page performance are certainly important. So Google gives more insight into some of the page speed metrics that are important to them, the core web vitals reports that you can see in Google Search Console. Page speed insights is a pretty good resource usually just to get a sense of, here are some of the things that are, potentially slowing your website down. And in general, building a faster site is going to be better for your users, for conversion, and for SEO. So, that's all, valuable. I think that's something that's been dialed up within the last few years. On the technical side, I think another couple things that have been dialed up. So one would be Google's looking at your content as a portfolio of content. And they've talked about this some with some of their, what they called the helpful content updates. They always have fun euphemisms for their updates. But one of the things they're looking at is your content what Google would consider thin, meaning there's not a lot of content on the page, or not particularly helpful or useful, and really specifically targeting search results rather than being useful for users, which kind of means low quality. And what percentage of the content on your site falls into that bucket, right? So again, if you have a lot of stuff that's indexable, and some of it might not be stuff that you're trying to game Google with, it's just, it looks like it's low quality to Google and it's getting into the index. And when one of the things that Google looks at is what we would call like pogo sticking, meaning somebody searches for something, your listing shows up, they go to your site, and then the person has a bad experience kind of immediately. Maybe the page loads really slow, maybe it doesn't fit with the search result, bounces back to the search result and picks something else, right? That's the kind of pogo sticking. So that's an indication to Google, because Google has the data of the user's interaction with their search listing, right? So that's an indication to Google, oh, this is a bad result. We're going to stop showing this result. And if you have enough of that with your listings that are showing up in search results, Google's going to say, oh, okay, this domain is not that great. So again, that might not be like a burn your domain to zero, but it's going to be like, oh, we're going to suppress them a little bit. We're not going to show them particularly for search terms related to this sort of basket of keywords that they're getting bad engagement for. And that piece too, being sort of what we call like a topical authority is another thing that I think has been dialed up, and that overlaps with, that's, partly content. Are you writing lots of content around the same topic, going really deep with multiple articles, covering what Google sees as a lot of the related topics, and also interlinking those strategically, right? So you're creating a basket of content around plumbing repair tips, or even like specific, issues with your, specific things that can go wrong with your toilet, and, how to and tips around that, but also interlinking those, making sure that, you think about, one of the concepts that we think about in terms of topic clusters, right? So like a hub page and what we would call spoke pages. And does that hub page link down to those spoke pages, right? So does your, plumbing repair tips page link off to each of the individual sort of tactics that you're talking about or problems that you're addressing? And then do those interlink strategically too? And that doesn't necessarily mean that every page has a link of like 500 internal links to everything within a cluster. It actually means like taking the time to contextually link those within the body copy of the content that you're creating, and linking them to the posts that are relevant. So one way to think about it that we frequently do is almost like you have your parent page, at the top of your cluster, it links down to each of the individual child pages. And then a lot of times the child pages almost link together like a chain. So there's, links, from one to the other, and particularly the topics within there that are the most relevant. So that's something that I think has really been dialed up. You used to even, I would say kind of pre-pandemic in the kind of the 2020 and before range, you would really be able to just kind of churn out a lot of posts that were within a niche. So maybe like the plumbing niche or the pet niche, but they weren't super tightly related to each other and they would all rank. Whereas now it's a lot more difficult to do that. Google's looking more for that topical authority. Like, are you writing deeply about this one topic? So, to take pets as an example, not just like, right, like one post on nail clippers for cats, one post on food for birds, one post on, the best, brush for a Bernedoodle. It's like, have you written 20, 50, 100 posts about Bernedoodles, right? That kind of thing. I have a Bernedoodle. So yeah.
Even though backlinks are ones that are relating to your sites, there seems to be this second kind of link category, which is internal links, where you write a post about toilets, and then you write a post about best lever mechanisms for toilets, and then you have a link from one article going to the other, and vice versa, and then you write a third article about the best toilet seat, and you link that to your other two. So you're kind of building this network of internal links, which is different than the backlinks, correct?
Correct. Yeah, exactly. So that's, the external links are links on different sites. And like I said, we want whatever the best combination of authoritative sites. So sites that are, popular and have lots of links, and relevant links. So a document that's about plumbing as opposed to, getting a link from a site that's all about pets to our plumbing site. But also the next layer to that too, particularly with internal links, which obviously is anchor text that you can control, is the anchor text or the linking text that you use from document to document. So for instance, if we're linking to our post about the best brushes for Bernedoodles, we don't want to use the same linking text every time that we link back to that page, because that kind of indicates to Google that we're sort of over optimized. We want to use different variations if we can, but pretty tightly. So not necessarily like click here or, here's the post, right, as the linking text, but also not just Bernedoodle brushes. It would be like, the best brushes for Bernedoodle, your Bernedoodles, our review of the best Bernedoodle brush, right? That could all be interlinked, right?
As Bernedoodle brushes that make your Bernedoodle happy.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. And a good way to think about that is to look at the basket of terms that you're trying to rank that particular page for, and using, you might have like 20 different, pretty specific variations that you're looking at either third-party keyword tools or in Google Search Console to see what that page has ranked for in the past, and using those as anchor text to kind of link to that page, thinking about that strategically too, can be really powerful. And when you have control over external links, like if you're getting a guest post or, maybe you have like a partner site that's linking to you, you want to use a similar tactic, right? So you want to vary the anchor text, but have it be, relevant and specific to the page that you're linking to.
I mean, some of these principles are quite easy to apply, right? For titles, headers, alt tags and images, meta descriptions, nicely named anchor links, of course. But in your opinion, what is the thing that is most underutilized in commercial sites?
I think that varies a lot from niche to niche, because the most important thing for different niches is going to be different, right? So I think broadly speaking, I think the topic cluster and internal linking might be one of the most underutilized. A lot of sites don't really link internally. Don't think about information architecture broadly too. So not just internal links, but where content lives within the site. So the difference between, they're related concepts, but when I talk about information architecture, it's more, if you think about, if you were a robot coming to your site, how many clicks would it take you to get from the homepage to any important page on your site that you want to have rank well? So an older blog post, for instance. So a lot of sites, when, we audit a lot of sites, it would be like 20 clicks deep, which is, again, pretty wild for sites that don't have that much content. For a page that they really want to have ranked, that's keyword rich, that they took a lot of time to create content for, but it's just buried very deep in the site. So thinking about that too, and what you want to think about is, generally speaking, most sites, the homepage will be the most linked to site. In some instances, you might have, link baits or specific, assets. Maybe you do like a yearly report or a linkable asset that does really well that'll rival the homepage depending on the site. But you want all of the content that you want to have ranked be as close to those pages, meaning as few clicks away or as flat an information architecture as you can. So I would say that concept, internal linking, and thinking about this clustering and really going deep within clusters is one of the things that's still the most underutilized. I think a lot of sites think about link building. Not all sites do it. And again, I think it actually has a variable ROI depending on your site. If you're a site that's targeting really low competition terms, you probably don't need a ton of external links, right? And it might make more sense to invest in content and in cleaning up technical issues and things like that. But if you're a B2B SaaS company where only a handful of terms are really going to drive ROI for you and they're in a really competitive market, then link building might have a great ROI for you, and that might be the most underutilized, right? So
all this talk about internal links has me thinking, do web crawlers or robots, do they understand single page applications?
Give me an example of what you mean by single page applications.
Like if the page loads up and all the content is just swapped out using JavaScript.
So you can build sites that use a lot of JavaScript and have them be search friendly, but generally speaking, if the site is built without an eye towards search optimization and making sure that Google can crawl it, you'll often find that Google's not going to be able to find a lot of the content or crawl the site, right? So thinking about the navigation elements being wrapped in JavaScript can often be problematic. A great tool for this to use is within Search Console. You can inspect URLs, right? And you can basically kind of see, so you put an inspect URL at the top of Search Console, then you can click test the live URL, and you can kind of see the URL the way that Google sees it, right? So you can get an idea of what is Google actually able to crawl and sort of ingest. It also shows you some of the JavaScript errors that Google's experiencing, right? Which again are a lot of times going to be different than what the somebody's just seeing in the browser. So that's a good sort of quick test when you roll something out, if particularly if you're finding that stuff. One of the things that we find a lot is when people design their blog homepage, they want a really clean, nice looking blog homepage, but it won't be crawlable, right? So things like if you have a load more button, a lot of times Google, or an infinite scroll, a lot of times Google's not going to scroll. They're not going to load more. And another good kind of trick for identifying that is you can do what's called a site search operator, where you can look within Search Console at your index pages. So you would look within Search Console to see which pages are indexed. That's a few clicks deep, but you can quickly see this just by going to google.com, hitting site : and your website, and then /blog if all your blog posts live off the blog subfolder, and then you'll see all of those URLs that Google's indexing. So if you look at that and you're not seeing some of your recent posts or some of your blog posts generally, that could be a red flag. And one of the things you can do is, again, right, take a blog post, go to that inspect URL in Search Console, and if you scroll down, Google actually shows you how they discovered the URL. So again, another red flag is if they're not discovering the URL through your site, like through your blog homepage, but they only found it, say, through your XML sitemap, that's potentially a red flag, right? That they're not crawling some of the content on your blog page. And we see that a lot, again, we're just with sites that will use different designs. So, still having paginated results, you can have both experiences. You can have a load more button for your users if you find that that's a better experience for them. I think generally if you do any heat map testing, you'll find that the vast majority of users do not scroll down to the bottom of your blog results listing. So it's actually probably more for SEO than anything, but you could have the load more button and then paginated results beneath that, so that there's a, again, crawlable HTML version of those results. And another tip I would say for those that we often find is a recommendation that we'll make for people is just to show more results for those too. Again, right? You can have the, stuff that you want to highlight above the fold, but so Google will typically crawl, it varies a little bit depending on how authoritative the site is, but they'll typically crawl around 100 links on a page. So if you're only showing 5 blog results and then you're going to pagination, right? It's again, right? You think about clicks, right? It's click, 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 right?
Yep.
To get deep into the archives. So showing more results and showing more of those paginated links. So instead of just showing like, okay, here's page 2, here's page 3, like one link per paginated result, showing here you can go to 1 to 10, or you can just go to the last page. Using that as a pagination tactic is another way, just from an information architecture standpoint, to flatten the site. And we've had that, especially for sites that have a lot of older blog content. That does pretty well. That can have a pretty significant impact on search traffic, just that you kind of bubble those pages up.
So those 100 clicks don't get reset if I paginate, for example.
They
So
do
it's
get
like,
get reset when you go to a new page. Yeah, when you paginate.
Right,
Yes,
right.
exactly. So each page would have kind of 100 links or so that Google would crawl. Again, that's just a rough.
If you had 100 blog posts, you could do 10 pages of 10 each, but it might be better to do 5 pages of 20 each. Right?
Exactly. Right. Because again, right. And, link to each of those from that homepage. Now everything is just a couple clicks away from the homepage, right? Because if the homepage links to the blog, instead of being, maybe again, right, like 10 or 15 pages deep by the time you get deep into the archives. Yeah.
And it could be that, you have topics of blogs, so you can have all the blogs on one topic as a page, and have that as a linked page. And if there's 20 of those blogs, that's great. You can get to them through the menu and on the home page, right? Also,
100%. Yeah. Using categories is a great idea. And then thinking about too, strategically, another mistake that I see a lot of sites make is having categories where it's like, again, right, like my plumbing site, I have like a plumbing category and like about Tom's plumbing company, and then like maybe I do a little bit of stuff with like HVAC, and then an HVAC category, and then if I write 100 posts, 94 of them are about plumbing, so those are all in the plumbing category, right? You want to actually think about categories where the posts will flow somewhat evenly into those categories, right? It's not going to be perfect, but so instead of just having a plumbing category, I'd have like separate categories for each of the different plumbing topics, right?
plumbing for showers, plumbing for toilets, plumbing for
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And then, another kind of thing to think about from an information architecture standpoint is where you expose links to those categories or topic clusters, right? So if I have, again, right, like, 6 or 8 of those different categories, I can have links to those from like the right nav of my blog or below blog posts, right? On each individual post. I can have links to those categories from like breadcrumbs on an individual post back up to the category that it's in. I can have links to those from the blog home, and I can even have links to those from the footer, right? So within the footer of my site, instead of just having like, my general like sort of about pages and privacy policy and some of the standard things you'd think about, I could have, the categories or like, our most popular topics or even individual blog posts that I really want to push link equity to, right? So all those things are good things to keep in mind, and, pushing link equity with popular posts and relevant posts. Again, I think those are all underutilized tactics. Yeah.
Yeah, I see that on landing pages now, where they're talking, like a B2B landing page. They talk about the company and they talk about their product, etc. And then they'll also have a section where it's 3 blog posts, with each one with a topic that's very relevant to what they're talking about above. And that way they link directly to those posts from the homepage. And those tend to be the posts they want to promote, obviously.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, for B2B, again, one of the ways to think about these topic clusters, it's obviously a lot harder now than it was. So 10 years ago, you had a sales page, right? Which was either like, plumbing services in, Boston or whatever. And you would say, okay, I want to rank this page, so I'm just going to fire a bunch of external links at this, right? And this is going to rank for whatever I want, right? Or maybe a better example is like, you have a software product, let's say that is, data loss prevention software, right? And you wanted your data loss prevention software page to rank for data loss prevention, right? You used to be able to just kind of fire links at that page and it would start to rank. Now Google's much more specific to the query intent. So it's not going to rank your data loss prevention software page for data loss prevention, because it knows that users really want an informational result for that. So they want like a glossary page for that, right? But one of the things that you can do is those pages can still rank for data loss prevention software. And a powerful way to do that is not just to build links into that page, because again, it can be hard to get like a quality editorial link into that page that actually makes sense. You're probably having to do some more Fiverr or, guest post type stuff. What you can do is actually build external links to your informational pages, right? So you might have like a data loss prevention glossary page, or even like a state of data loss prevention or something, right? Report. You get links to that page, and then that page is linking back to the data loss prevention software page, and they're part of the same cluster, right? So a lot of those pages within that cluster are ranking to the software page where it makes sense, and pushing link equity over to that page. And that's a way to get, more transactional pages that you want to have rank without having to kind of crowbar links into that page. You're building links to those other pages that are then pushing that link equity and, sort of relevance over to that page too.
Obviously there's B2B and B2C. They probably take some very different tactics. Let's say that you were building a t-shirt site to sell t-shirts online. Mm-hmm. As a business person who's trying to establish that business, a lot of people it's easier to think about the product they're going to make and produce, right? And then to do all the marketing or to set up the website is less of a familiar thing per se. But say you have a small business person, he wants to do that. What are some of the things that he should start focusing on to launch his business, besides just getting a site up and getting the e-commerce working and the product sold? What would kind of be like the first next step after getting it up and running that he should focus on to start tailoring the SEO strategy so that he can start receiving traffic?
Sure. So I think probably the first step is to think about keyword targeting and the types of terms that they would want to rank for that would make sense for their business and that would be a fit for the relative authority of the site. So one of the things that you need to keep in mind, especially as you're starting a new site, is that there's a whole universe of terms that you're not going to be able to rank for out of the gate, right? So again, as you think about the sort of keywords that you want to target and the topic clusters that you want to target, you want to have potentially a mix of things that are very low competition and things that are a little bit more ambitious that you might rank for down the line. And you start to build out that cluster sort of with that in mind. So some of the ways that you can think about to, identify some of these terms that you want to target, you would, use traditional keyword research tools, brainstorming, just topic ideation, thinking about some of the terms that you might want to rank for, checking those against some of the third-party keyword tools, which will give you, rough volume estimates to see like, okay, does it look like people are searching for these? And then also looking at competitor sites, right? And building out your keyword strategy. Okay, these are the different types of terms that I would want to rank for. So that's kind of piece one. And then the second piece would be thinking about the types of pages that will be able to rank for those terms. So again, you think about it from a t-shirt company, there are going to be some transactional terms like, if they're doing different, types of prints of, like niche t-shirts, like, if they're creating
heavy
like
metal t-shirts, right?
Right. Heavy metal t-shirts or specific band name t-shirts, things like that. Those will be more transactional, but they'll probably be very competitive, right? So they'll want to potentially find like a combination of long tail terms that are, really specific, like, black heavy metal t-shirts, that XYZ, right? Like really specific phrases that they would be able to rank for out of the gate, but also maybe have like, some of those heavy metal t-shirt, sort of category pages. And then also think about, again, within that realm of different topics, are there tangential terms that are more informational that they can create informational blog content against and use a similar strategy to what we talked about with the B2B SaaS, where it's like, it's an informational topic, maybe related a little bit more broadly to heavy metal style, right? Right, like, heavy metal in general even. What are some of those types of topics that are related to these terms? And one of the things to use too is some of Google's own tools, right? And some of Google's own data. So some, sort of classic things that tend to work well are looking at the things that Google suggests related to a term. So you go to google.com, you type in heavy metal t-shirts and hit space, and you'll see some of their search suggestions, right? So Google's creating those suggestions for a searcher based on things that other people have searched for related to that core term. So that's a good way to think about it. You can look at the search result itself and see some of the things that they're layering in. So there's generally a lot of people also ask sections in search results now where those are related questions. And if you click on one of them and kind of open it and close it, you'll start to see more of those, right? And there's tools that automate this too. So search response, that's searchresponse.io, is a good tool for this. It sends back a lot of, they either will show you people also ask. The thing that's cool about that tool is they'll show you the people also ask questions and how many search results that search response is aware of that particular question has shown up in. So if that's showing up across lots of different questions, that's a good indicator. And some of those are, the other thing that's nice about that is you can sometimes unearth things that are a little bit less competitive because so most of your competitors are going to go to a tool like Ahrefs or SEMrush or Google Keyword Planner, type in heavy metal t-shirts and see all those results, right? So when you go to target some of those, you're going to be competing with all your competitors, right? Whereas not everybody's going to search response to see these, and some of those won't show search results won't show search volume in an Ahrefs or a SEMrush, but will actually have search volume, right? So that's another good trick. And hitting a lot of those, right? You start to get a topic cluster, and you know that those are things that Google finds to be related because they're showing those in the same core search result, right? So that's a good way to find some of those related topics, interlink those. And again, some of those more informational terms will be things that will be easier for you to build external links for too. So those are good ways to think about it.
Speaking of keywords, I mean, when acting as a functional analyst, one of the most challenging things about working with new clients is figuring out what it is that they really want. And a significant part of it is keyword research, naturally. Service that we went quite in depth on. And I've tried to do it a couple of times over the past years, but I haven't ever discovered a reliable way to find all the new tangential keywords that may be relevant. How would you, I mean, we already talked about typing it into Google, right? I mean, that's free research right there. But if I need something more brainstorming like, is there a tool readily available for that?
Yeah, in terms of like top level, like, just some of the universe of, so I would say a few things. I mean, one thing that we always do as part of a client engagement is just to get feedback from the client as part of like a kickoff questionnaire and sort of, what do you view as potential terms that people might be typing in, right? And what are some, some other things that you can do there too, I think is really to dive deep. So a couple other questions that we'll ask clients that I think are good ways to find different, again, general topic areas are, who are your direct competitors? A lot of times clients' direct competitors may actually not be the best source of keyword data just because they might not be doing any SEO, right? Or they might be doing it poorly. So you don't always necessarily just want to like blanket copy the site that's getting the most traffic, because we've had instances where a client will have a competitor and we'll look at a lot of their terms and we'll say, oh, okay, this is the competitor who's getting the most search traffic. Potentially you'd want to emulate them. We'll bring back some of the terms that they're ranking for, and the client will be like, those are totally irrelevant. We don't want to rank for any of that stuff, right? And maybe the client's right in the sense that like that site might be ranking for a lot of super broad stuff that's not bringing them any business, right? So competitors are a decent starting point, but you also want to think about popular publications within the niche, right? So, and again, if you don't know those, personally, you can go to your client or try to, talk to people who have a high level of expertise or, potentially like service teams or salespeople who are talking to a lot of people. What are the publications that those people are reading, that your prospects are reading? What are they using for top level categories, right? So if you go to like, a site that's, a niche publication really specific to what your client does, what are the categories that they're using when you kind of just look at their top level nav even, right? What are the posts that get the most traffic for them and get the most links? Another one that we use that I think is a good hack for just like top level stuff is what are popular conferences, right? And looking at, so conferences obviously don't have any kind of intent about search traffic necessarily, right? But they are sort of the conference organizers have their pulse on the niche, right? And they're thinking about high level topic areas and things that are trending. And sometimes those could be areas that might not have the most search volume right now, but will in a few months. So, an example is like ChatGPT. If you look in third-party keyword research tools like Ahrefs or SEMrush, it shows very little search volume for a lot of ChatGPT related terms, but you obviously know that there's a ton of people searching for that stuff, right? If you're in the niche, obviously right now, right? And those tools will catch up, and in a couple months it'll start to show that, right? But so conference organizers can be kind of like that for a specific niche. They might be sort of on the forefront of what those specific niches find interesting. So looking at the tracks that they're running and the specific talks, and also like anything that you can do to kind of get a gauge of like, oh, okay, like what's the sort of keynote, who seems to be getting like the prominent position within these conferences, and what are they talking about? What's their area of expertise? That can be another, sort of proxy for what's like a good high level topic area. And then you can start to dive deep using some of the tools that we talked about once you have a sense of that high level topic area. Another one that's actually pretty good is to think about like the way that books about a topic are structured, right? So again, right, if you're addressing a specific area within a niche, you might look for like a book on that topic. If you're marketing to more novice people within an industry, you might look for like dummies books, right? Or like 101 on a topic, and just look at how the chapters are structured. That'll give you like top level, topic areas, right? Because again, that person has probably taken a pretty thorough, comprehensive look, if you look at a few different books, and tried to think about how to organize all of the information related to that topic area. So that could be another, or courses on the topic too, right? Like what are the different, modules that somebody has within a course. Those can all be good ways to sort of get a good high level idea of different topic areas that you might want to dive into.
If you were making a site that was focused on, say, headphones and headsets for, the audio industry, and you went to a trade show like CES, Consumer Electronics Show, and you looked at their, they have a lot of seminars, and you find a bunch of seminars on the newest microphone technology for headsets, you would know that that's a topic that's kind of relevant in coming in. Or you pick up a dummy book, how to build a headset, and you see all the structure of topics for it. You could use that as kind of a guide to structuring your content.
Exactly. Or if you see like an enthusiast site, right, that your prospects are interested in, and it could be a message board, it could be kind of like a subreddit, looking for topics on subreddits. Again, those might not be a proxy for things that people are searching for, but they give you kind of a jumping off point, and you can start to dive in there. And the other thing to do too, as you start to sort of drill a little deeper, is again, right, like, so your competitors, in the competitors that your client or you as a business think are your business competitors, might not always be the same as your search competitors. So a way to think about it is, when you find a really good term and you and or the client are like, oh, that's a great term, look at the sites that are ranking within that search result, particularly the sites that have a similar level of authority to yours, right? Like have similar sort of domain authority metrics, external linking metrics when you look at them in Ahrefs or SEMrush, and dive deeper into those sites, right? Because if they're ranking for that term, they're probably ranking for other related terms that again are relevant for you, and are things that you can potentially compete on if they're a comparable level of domain authority to you. So that's another good thing to do as you drill down.
So if you're kind of planning out a site or building a site for your business, the keywords and there are probably, you can easily come up with 5 or 6 keywords that are very relevant to your business. How deep should someone really go into how many keywords? I mean, if you pick 5 and they're very relevant and you focus on those 5, are you leaving a lot on the table versus having 15 keywords, in which 5 are core and another 5 are kind of related, and the last 5 are, yes, they can apply to your business or what you're selling, but they're there because they have some minor connection. Does it matter how many? Is it better to focus on few, or is it better to have everything?
So I would say now it's better to focus on few. And what I would typically advise is say you have, you're mapping out a few months of content and you're saying, hey, we're going to create 60 pieces of content in the next few months. I would pick 3 or 4 core sort of topic areas and go really deep within each of those areas, as opposed to just doing, 60 different topics or 30 different topics with, or 20 to 30 different topics with 2 or 3 posts in each topic, which is actually the opposite of what I would have recommended, say, like 5 years ago. Because again, you could have gone a lot thinner and sort of used more of a portfolio theory and seen what stuck and then gone deeper there. But now I think actually you're not going to get traction with those if you're just doing a lot of one-off stuff. So I would go deeper. So again, right, like you would pick your sort of few core topic areas and say, okay, this is the stuff that's absolutely the most relevant, and go really deep within that topic area and go for a mix of, again, right, things that are showing some search volume, some of those related search suggestions that might not even show any search volume. But, again, right, like you can see from the people also ask or the search suggestions that there is some, sort of scent of information that there's likely to be some search volume there. And that they're related to that core kind of topic cluster that you're creating. And I wouldn't necessarily run with a topic cluster unless you're willing to do at least like 10 to 20 pieces of content around that topic cluster. That tends to be, and again, so sometimes it depends on the competitiveness of the niche too, right? So if you're in a really competitive niche, you might need more like 50 or 100 posts around that topic to really compete, because a lot of other sites are doing that. And operating at that level. And then again, there's obviously other variables like how competitive is it, how authoritative are the sites that you're competing with, all that stuff. But yeah, I think 10 to 20 would be a good guideline in terms of how deep you want to go within a topic cluster as a minimum.
There was a brief moment in time when, I don't know if you remember this, but like word clouds or search term clouds were very popular. Like every site had them, and it was just a bunch of words. It was just thrown on the page, but that trend didn't seem to go anywhere. So
no, yeah, I think there's a lot of wild stuff if you look back at what used to work, right? There used to be, early on, Google had to outlaw stuff like putting white text on a white background, right? Because it was, and some of these search engines were so easy to fool that it was like you would have like your, it would be like, Susie's dog site, and then the text would be like casinos, right? And it would rank for casino related stuff, right? Or like you said, you could just have a word cloud and mention a bunch of random stuff, and that would be stuff that you would rank for. But certainly a lot more sophisticated now, and they just keep sort of raising the bar in terms of the level of depth and different moving pieces that you have to. And I think one of the things that they've really dialed up and gotten a lot better at within the last couple of years is just that query intent. Even as recently as a couple of years ago, I think Google was pretty bad at things like, within the affiliate space particularly, a lot of sites got hit where they would be ranking on very broad terms like dog food, right? Where if somebody's searching dog food, Google's now kind of determined the intent is probably that they want to purchase some dog food. Whereas if they are searching for best dog food, they might want more of a review article. But a couple of years ago, it was a lot easier to get your review article to rank for just dog food, right? So Google's continually dialing up that. And some of the things that you'll see now too is they'll actually show more variety in some search results. So the example of data loss prevention, right? Whereas a couple years ago, it might have been all glossary pages. Now they might show, okay, we're going to have a couple glossary pages, but actually it's a better user experience if we don't have 10, because the people looking for a glossary style overview will pick the first couple. And then we want to have actually like best practices articles and, X number of tips article, right? So it makes it even more difficult to optimize for those search results, right? Because you have to kind of balance like, okay, what type of content can I rank in this SERP? What's this thing that I'm going to be best at? What other variables do these sites that are ranking have that mine may or may not have? Like those glossary style results, if those are just off the charts authoritative, I'm probably not going to get those spots. So maybe I'd be better off creating like more of a tips article or a best practice article. So, a sort of final level as you're thinking about the content you want to create is actually to look at the search result. That's actually, again, a kind of an underrated step that I think a lot of people don't take, is like really delving into like, okay, I'm going to create a piece of content that I'm going to try to rank for data loss prevention and some related terms. I need to actually look at these search results that I'm targeting, see the types of things that are ranking there, and take that into account as I'm creating my article too.
The tactic or strategy that has the most ROI at this point seems to be that of content generation. Putting out a flow of consistent content on your site, and that content having a structure and an organization and a relationship to each other. That seems to be the most, I guess, cost-effective way that, say, a small business could start adding value and getting traffic, organic traffic to their site. So that challenge, in some ways, things like ChatGPT and some of these AI tools can produce a bunch of content. I think that I've experimented with it, and we actually had a guest on our last podcast who talked a lot about it.
Mm-hmm.
That content can come across as low saturation. It's very glossy, doesn't say a lot. It may have some keywords in it, it may have a rough outline. But most AI-generated content, even if you're really good at the query, right, you still need to edit it to get it to relate and fit into the context of what your site and business is all about. I think a lot of people, though, are not very educated on it, so they just type in something to ChatGPT and then take whatever the output is and just throw it on their site as a blog article. And that may actually have negative results in search versus another. But that is a question. I'm sure Google is thinking a lot about this. And I'm sure that in the next couple of months, you're going to start seeing a whole bunch of this AI-generated content that wasn't curated by a person or a company who actually knows what they're doing. And it's just basically verbal garbage, right?
No,
But
that's already there.
Yeah, it's already there. How do you think that's going to impact the industry or search in Google?
Yeah, so I think it's obviously a very hot topic, and SEOs are kind of famous for trying to get as much leverage out of any new technology as we can, right? So I think, and like Botond said, this isn't like a super new concept in the sense that, so again, I've been doing this for, over 10 years. One of the things that people used to do was use what were called content spinners, right? And so that was like a very pedestrian version of this sort of AI generated content where you would put in sort of paragraph templates and vary them by, the times that they show up. And you would have 10 different, potential sentences, and you would use wildcard variables. And so it would be like, we have the greatest insert product here. You can get it in different colors, like insert the colors that you can get it here, right? And you would just mash it up, right? So those were pretty dumb, right? Compared to the new AI software, and were pretty easy to detect. But like anything else, it worked until it didn't, right? And some people probably made a ton of money off of that approach. But yeah. So, at one time, right? But so, the AI, to your point, right? I think that, and even more recently, even before ChatGPT, people were using Jasper, AI and some of these other tools, to generate some of this AI content. And one thing I would say to people is to keep in mind, especially if you're a small business owner, that there's different rules for different sites, right? Like everything in life, right? So somebody CNET, there was, publication or publicity around a couple of these things, right? So CNET and Sports Illustrated, right? They both kind of had these incidents where they've been using AI content, and already there were people kind of caught them generating AI content with just wildly factually incorrect information. And in the case of the Sports Illustrated content, it was on, I think, Men's Health, one of the, publications that Sports Illustrated owns. And it was sort of like how to increase testosterone type content that was just wrong, right? And doctors were like, this is, kind of misinformation and potentially dangerous, right? So, but those articles for CNET, somebody did some analysis around it, look like they're already ranking, right? But the fact that CNET rolls out articles that are low quality and AI doesn't mean that you can, right? The same articles that will rank well on CNET might get your site into trouble with Google, right? Because Google's looking at, again, a variety of factors where Google's trusting everything that CNET rolls out. And by default, they're kind of not trusting anything that you roll out, right? So I would keep that in mind. Just because you see somebody or like a case study where somebody says like, oh, I generated 10,000 AI articles in 2 weeks and this is where my traffic went, you're not seeing the month 3 to 5 of that site, right? And that site might have other characteristics that are different than yours. So that's worth keeping in mind. And I think it's just like anything else, right? So you're going to have levels to it. There's going to be people who figure out how to, and people are already coming out with tools that layer on prompts to the ChatGPT API that say, okay, take the output and also format it this way, right? And do like, and then layer on this additional prompt. And some of those tools will be more useful than just getting the output directly from, the sort of GPT-4 powered ChatGPT interface or whatever. But for a lot of those, you'll still have to QA everything, right?
Yeah.
And I think the couple of things to keep in mind with ChatGPT are, one, and I think this is, one of the, sort of most important things for your brand and just ethically and morally, ChatGPT is often confident but wrong. So it gives very right sounding feeling answers that are just wrong. Yeah. Right. And if you've played with it a lot, then you know that this is the case. So you have to really carefully QA it and make sure and not sometimes it'll be wrong or it'll just kind of be directionally wrong. It'll give you sort of a way to do something that's not really the most efficient way. So you do have to have somebody with some level of expertise if you want the content to be accurate, reviewing the content and QAing it. The other thing to keep in mind about ChatGPT is it's not an SEO tool, right? So again, that's why some of these interfaces that are laid on top of it could be really useful because they can layer on some SEO best practices or SEO data. But when you ask ChatGPT to give you an outline for an article, it's not really leveraging SEO best practices. It's not, another thing to keep in mind with ChatGPT is all the information is based on a set of training data that's from late 2021. Yep. So it's not going to have any, up-to-date, sort of statistical information or, and it's not using like a search API. I did an article for Search Engine Land. And one of the things I did was, you can look at the prompts that I used and the output that I got. I said to ChatGPT, give me some long tail keywords. And it gave me long tail keywords on a specific topic. Then I said to ChatGPT, how did you get these keywords? And it worked through, and it said, I got these keywords by doing A, B, and C. And it was like, I went to the Ahrefs API, and then I got keyword data there. And then I looked at the search results, and just knowing how ChatGPT works, I said to ChatGPT, as though it was like a person, hey, ChatGPT, that's not possible. Like, I know that you can't do that. Is that really true? And it was like, oh, I'm sorry for the confusion. I actually didn't do any of that. That's a process that one could do, right? So it literally lied to me, right? So again, when you're, you have to be really careful with this and sort of understand how the tool works and QA the output. Cause, if I didn't know any better, I would have been like, oh, awesome. It's using all these SEO best practices. This is going to be a great SEO article. When in reality, and when I actually, again, QA'd the list and looked at it, they didn't have any search volume. There was no search volume for any of those long tail terms. And, if I had just gone and created a bunch of content against that, those ideas, I might have spent, thousands of dollars or tons of hours, right? Like, optimizing against the wrong thing. So, that's all. It's a very powerful tool that's going to be really interesting for, I think, automating a lot of processes, but it's still very flawed, and you got to kind of understand how it works and, what checks to put in and all that stuff. Yeah.
So, by the way, allegedly, the latest version of ChatGPT actually does that.
Well, so it
allegedly
doesn't. I don't think so. I've played with ChatGPT 4, and I actually ran some of the same prompts, right? And the places that it falls down, I find, so ChatGPT 4 is much better at handling more complex tasks, but it still messes them up a lot. So I'll give you a specific example. This was with GPT-4, which is the underlying technology for ChatGPT. So if you're like a paid user, you can select a drop down and use 3.5 or 4. So this was using 4. This is not on the old tool. I said to ChatGPT, for a set of URLs, generate title tags for me, right, that I would use for search, and limit the character count to 65, which is something that it's not good at. It doesn't really understand character counts, and give me 3 columns, a column for the URL, a column for the title tag, and a column for character count, right? So you would think that's like a fairly straightforward task that, the ChatGPT would be able to do. So it did some of it, right? So it gives me the URL back in a column. It gives me a title tag. A lot of them were actually fairly short and within the character count. But then in the third column, it would give me either character counts that were incorrect, right? Or instead of a character count, it just gave me the domain of the URL. It wasn't a character count. It was just like, text, right? So again, the more complex you get, whereas if I had just given the URL and the title tag, it probably would have spit it back out correctly, right? So the more complicated the task, the more sort of prompts that you need to use, the more sort of rot for error you're going to get as the output, and the more you really need to QA. But again, one of the things that I think ChatGPT is really cool for is as a starting point for stuff like that. So, an example, we talked about keyword research. I showed this prompt too. You can say to ChatGPT, like, hey, what would the, outline for a book on, plumbing for dummies look like? And it'll actually give you a pretty good starting point. You don't want to take that and just build your website around that necessarily, but it gives you like a pretty good outline of like, oh, okay, these are actually pretty good top line ideas. And similarly for title tags, it's like, oh, that's not a bad idea for a title tag, but if I'm looking at Search Console data, third-party keyword tool data, I'm going to create a much better title tag, right? So it can give you like a starting point for a structure for that. But depending on, and again, if I have like a ton of pages that are somewhat low value and I need to create like meta descriptions for those, it can be a cool tool for that, right? It can be very useful for that. And I might just want to run with those meta descriptions, versus the time it would take me, especially if you're like a small business owner or something, to actually generate title tags or meta descriptions for all those pages. But yeah, you want to be aware of its limitations.
That's how I think of ChatGPT as useful as a tool. We use it basically to write some content, and the way we use it is I ask it for a basic outline. I would like to, applications for an infrared camera in the security industry. And it would give me a fairly structured outline, maybe 300 words. And I'm looking to write an article for, 1,200 words. I would, at least I have a structure. I don't have to think about the structure. I can then think about how do I fill in the various points, do the research, find articles that are relevant to it, and link that in. And instead of that process taking 4 hours, it takes 2.5 hours, right?
Yep. Yeah, and the way I think of it too is almost like, you can think of it like a very junior assistant, right? Mm-hmm. And it's similar in the sense that, right, it's like you have to create a good SOW for, somebody, a good statement of work for somebody when you're giving them a new task. You kind of have to do that in your prompts, right? You want to think about, how do I structure this prompt in a way that ChatGPT will understand it and give me the right output? How do I only want to delegate tasks that it's going to be good at, just like an employee, right? You don't want to give them something that's going to be impossible for them. And I want to QA it, right? Particularly if I've seen that it doesn't do this task particularly well, right? Yeah. So yeah, but if you give it the right task with the right input and the right sort of QA on the back end, it can save you a lot of time for sure. Yeah. And outlines, I think, is a good use of that. And again, another thing you can do with like content outlines is, you can sort of feed it some of the items that you want to have included in the outline too, right? So you can say, give me an outline for this topic, and right, maybe I grabbed some of those people also ask terms or some of those suggested, related search terms. Like, give me an outline for this topic and make sure to include these, 5 terms as, subtopics within the outline or headers within the outline, right? And then again, right, like you just kind of have a jump start on that, and it'll fill in other stuff that's not as search specific, but you have a blend of all the stuff that you want to make sure you have for your on-page SEO, but also you cover the topic really thoroughly, which, is good for SEO as well.
For the future of SEO, what do you think are going to be the things that are going to most affect SEO in the next, 3 or 4 years?
That's a great question. So AI is definitely one of them, and the sort of flood of AI content, and thinking about how to, like we talked about, right, like both leverage and differentiate yourself, right? I think increasingly Google's going to look to, or, if another search engine, if it wins, is going to look to find signals that indicate not only that you have content on a particular topic, but that you have a deep level of expertise, right? And that's something that they talk about a lot. And I think sometimes when you are interpreting things that Google say in the press, it's almost like they're sort of trying to speak into existence what they want to have happen. So when they talk about EAT or EAT now, right? And they say, oh, we have this like super ingrained in the algorithm. What they really mean is like, we're trying to get to this as much as we can, and we're making some progress, and we have different things that are a proxy for it, but actually we're not as good at it as we want to be. So we're trying to scare people into, like doing it anyway. But that doesn't mean that they're trying to get there, right? So thinking about like, layering expertise on top of AI content, what are the areas that you can leverage these sort of AI tools to create content at scale, but still having a level of QA and a level of expertise that differentiates you. I think that's going to be a big component. Continually, I think like how you can demonstrate that you have a deep level of expertise with a lot of different content, a lot of different types of content. And I think increasingly that'll probably be different types of media. So as Google looks at, are you an authority? Not just do you have a lot of different types of blog posts on a topic, but do you have blog content and video content? Are you going really deep on this topic? Do you have some sort of bio that is an indication that you have expertise on this topic? I think all those things will be important. And I think performance is, your page performance and, making sure that you have, fast loading pages across a lot of different devices is going to be important too. Because, again, obviously like I think a lot of niches that have historically people have searched on desktop will see more and more mobile traffic, more and more traffic across different types of devices. I think in the next 5 years, right, you never know, there might be a different form factor that people are browsing more on. So making sure that you have really fast loading, high performance, content and applications for things.
That's kind of why like
important
Jamstack is getting popular, because it creates fast loading pages and
yeah.
Obviously YouTube, you mentioned YouTube has its own search engine, and I assume that you work a lot in trying to get YouTube content, because people are looking more and more at video and reading less. And although Google is based really on text, they're trying to incorporate video. I think video is important, right?
Yeah, for sure. And AI is another area that's going to, I think, impact video and make it easier for people to create video. And you're already seeing some of, again, right, like some of these sort of tools that will, and like, the most pedestrian version is they just sort of take your blog posts, put stock photos on a video and turn your text into a, transcription that's read by somebody. But, we'll have probably more advanced versions of that, image creation, right, with things like DALL-E and things. I think that'll increasingly, and again, you'll have to kind of level up the user experience on your pages in terms of like the expectation will be that your images will be really high quality, right? And that you'll have like cool prompts that you're coming up with, and AI generated images, the sort of table stakes for the images that you can create will be higher. Having video on blog posts, again, right, like might eventually be table stakes. It'll be hard to rank if you don't have some sort of video element, right? Yep. And again, and also like social networks too. I think another thing that I think will probably likely be a thing that we see with SEO more broadly is just a little bit of diversification in terms of the way that people are getting answers to questions. So a lot of people have talked about, ChatGPT replacing Google. I think if that happens, that's way, way out. And probably isn't likely. If you use ChatGPT a lot, that like, if you replaced Google with ChatGPT for a week, you would not want to, you would be dying to go back to Google at the end of the week. But I think there are going to be niche applications. So, and that you've already seen, like, there have been some of these studies that like, and I know this is true for my kids, kids under 15 use TikTok as a search engine more than Google, right? And I don't think that'll be true for everything, but query dependent, it'll definitely be true, right? And there's definitely stuff where like, we'll be talking about something and I'll go to Google and my kids will go to TikTok, right? To find like the answer to something, right? So, thinking about what types of queries are going to be searched for the most on what types of platforms, and then optimizing for those and being in those places for your brand is going to be important too, I think. Yeah.
Well, I know you have a company, and do you want to talk a minute about what your company does or specializes in?
Yeah, absolutely. So for Measured SEM, we offer consulting services both a combination of SEO and PPC. So we do what you would think of as more, sort of traditional SEO blocking and tackling, things like technical site audits, crawling your site, topic ideation and keyword research. We also do ongoing content creation and promotion. So those are SEO specific assets. So some of the things that we talked about, like creating linkable assets that you would do outreach for, or glossary style content that would target specific terms. We do a lot of that work for clients. Then we do, sort of more traditional PPC campaign management across primarily AdWords, Bing, LinkedIn, or Facebook, and just managing page search spend for clients as well. And we work with, a variety of different businesses and different niches. Tend to be a lot of like medium-sized businesses. We work with like a lot of B2B SaaS or, B2C e-commerce type companies. So, yeah.
And how do people get a hold of you?
So quickest way is probably tom@measuredsem.com via email. I'm a very quick email response. Again, that's showing my age. Email is usually the best platform for me. But you can also just go to our website, fill out a form, measuredsem.com. Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, Tom, thank you very much. It was an excellent conversation about SEO. I learned a lot myself. And for our listeners, next month we'll have another interesting podcast on the ScreamingBox Technology and Business Rundown podcast.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
All righty. Thank you. Thank you very much for taking this journey with us. Join us for our next exciting exploration of technology and business in the first week of every month. Please help us by subscribing, liking, and following us on whichever platform you're listening to or watching us on. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and please let us know any subjects or topics you would like us to discuss in our next podcast by leaving a message for us in the comment sections or sending us a Twitter DM. Till next month, please stay happy and healthy.